Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of the Mental Corner podcast, the show where I bring on guests from all different backgrounds to talk all the things mental health. I'm your host, Harry Potvin, and today I have the pleasure of being joined by Melanie Reese. Melanie is the founder of Trauma Therapy of Nashville, where she serves clients that struggle with trauma, women's issues, relationships, chronic pain, and illness. She is also the co-founder and executive director of Integrative Therapy of Nashville, which consists of a group of practitioners who believe that healing occurs by treating the whole person. Melanie was a lot of fun to talk to, and I want to thank her again for coming on and having this discussion with me. Now, before we get into the episode today, guys, you all know what's up. If you're listening, please like, comment, share, subscribe, give 5 stars if you're on that podcast platform. Share with someone who might want to hear this episode. It's a really great one, and I can't wait for you to listen. I'll talk to you all very soon. Have a great rest of your day. Peace. Melanie, thank you so much for joining me today.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
I'm excited to have you. So before we get into, because off camera I mentioned I had a couple questions about certain things, but what kind of started you on this journey of psychotherapy and starting this business that you have?
Yeah, I guess what got me interested in mental health and all those things. I think I took a class in undergrad. It was a human development family studies major, and we had to pick these certain like seminar classes that were going to get more specific about some things. And it was a like marriage and family, like couples type thing, to where it was just an introduction of like your very basic, like here's what some of this might look like. And it was very interesting. My parents also got divorced whenever I was in college and undergrad. And that was, hard thing to go through, like for anybody, but that was, so I think that was some of the draw. And I know whenever I started seriously thinking about, okay, I want to maybe go back to grad school, this is something I really want to do. It was, at first it was, I want to save all the couples from getting divorces and I want to help all the kids that went through it. And I don't work with couples or children.
So you achieved your goal.
Yes, absolutely. Well, there were things I wasn't aware of, like trauma, the way that it's a buzzword now. Back then, it was really held in just those places of those really big things, those big scary things you think of. And so when I decided to go back to grad school, which was 7 years after I graduated from undergrad, they say stay open-minded, like have something you're interested in, but stay open. And so I made sure when I did my clinical work, it was somewhere that I was gonna get a wide range of things. So whenever I started with that, it was kind of a joke. I kept getting these like big cases with a lot of stuff going on. But it didn't scare me in the way like some things you hear and it's like, oh, that would scare me to work with. Like those are the things I push into and really enjoy. So I got trained in EMDR very early as an intern. I asked the director there, I knew there was a nonprofit agency that would train you in EMDR if you worked at a nonprofit for about half the price. And so I reached out to them and they're like, if you can get, a certain amount, that want the training, will come to Nashville. I was like, yes. So I asked I was like, can I have your access to all your contacts? And let me see if, who might be interested. So we ended up getting, that's how I got trained in EMDR at a very early stage. I was very lucky to get it that early, in my becoming a therapist. And then I just started seeing it work, the brain-based stuff. I don't know if you're familiar with EMDR. That one's been around longer with more research behind it. But it's a brain-based therapy that works really well with trauma. So I did that for like 10 years probably. And then that's when brain spotting. A therapist friend of mine went to a therapist that did it, and she told me she had a memory from like a birth memory. And I was like, whoa, that's crazy. So I was doing EMDR with a ton of my clients and I gotten stuck with one. And so I like to just explore and try things. Like I know there's not one that's going to fit everybody. It's not like, okay, let's run you through, you're good. So I like to experiment and try different things. Well, I got stuck in the processing doing EMDR. So I was like, would you give permission, if it's okay with you? I have a therapist that my friend that had experienced it, went and got trained in it. And she works with the kids. And I was like, will you come in and do a session of brain spotting? I want to see what happens. And she just moved right through it. So like, all right, this is something to pay attention to. So I went and got trained in it and have done tons of the training within the brain spotting now. And I pull in aspects of EMDR, but mainly kind of lead with the brain spotting. So that was a long answer to your, what got you into it.
Yeah, no, I love
That's kind of the evolution of it.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. So I'm actually not very familiar with the whole EMDR method. How do you go about doing that, and what is it, I guess, because I'm not very knowledgeable on that.
Okay, so EMDR and brain spotting are both brain-based therapies, meaning they're targeting things in the brain to process. And so they're letting the body, we have this natural scanning ability in our body to be able to heal and process. So like when we're asleep at night, we go into our REM cycle and our eyes go back and forth. So EMDR is a brain-based therapy, and it stands for, let me back up. So these are both brain-based therapies.
Yep.
Brain spotting was created out of EMDR.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so it might be helpful to kind of talk about these in tandem with each other.
Yeah.
Because they do and access the brain and do a lot of the same things. With EMDR, that's going to be where it's using bilateral stimulation back and forth with eye movement, because when we sleep, that's what our brain is doing. That our eyes are going back and forth, and that's an attempt. Our brain's kind of like processing the day for us while we're sleeping. Everything our body does while we sleep is meant to help renew us to keep going.
Right.
So the brain's doing that. So, but when we have these bigger experiences, it can be a little much for the brain to process. And so it kind of puts a capsule around it and files it in the midbrain, which is not we're not consciously thinking of it. We live in our front brain, and that's where we make sense and how we talk and explore. But then we've got that midbrain, which is not a conscious access, where that stuff gets filed. So it's kind of helpful in that way, because if we constantly had everything right there, we wouldn't be able to function very well. So both of these therapies are going to access those files in the midbrain. EMDR is going to do it with the bilateral stimulation back and forth, and that can be done with headphones and tones or things that vibrate in your hand going back and forth, or you can watch a light going back and forth. It's a very structured therapy that's going to go through about 8 phases. And so you're doing desensitization and reprocessing. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Like we're desensitizing to the things that are kind of keep us stuck, that we're having these responses. I look at anxiety, depression, OCD, addiction. Those are all symptoms of things that are stuck in our body that have not been processed.
Right.
So EMDR, like I said, is going to be more about when you're walking. That's I think why people love running a lot of times. They go for a run and they get it worked out. That's where bilateral stimulation, we're letting the body talk and process by doing that. So it can be as big as we're running and getting a full body back and forth, or it could be simply tapping your knees back and forth, or having a ball and tossing it. I love a slinky. You're really getting that weight shift distribution.
Right.
So that's how that's going to work. The brain spotting is, instead of a back and forth, there's eye positions that correspond with those internal kind of files that have been filed away. So we get to take a look at those files to let process. By certain eye positions are going to have more meaning or stimulation or connection to what we're wanting to look at in the body.
So, sorry. So your eye position can unlock things in your midbrain. It's like a key.
That's a great metaphor. So And whenever someone's telling a story, do you ever notice they may keep looking up, like they're looking at a certain spot while they're telling a story?
I do it all the time.
So you're accessing that information in the brain. So, because that eye position is giving you the most access. Now, sometimes we're just thinking, but
Yeah.
I'm a trauma therapist, so I'm having people tell stories that have emotional, value to them, and so they're going to respond more with some eye movement stuff. So then when we look at the eye position with the brain spotting, it's going to give us access. We get to kind of pass that front brain that keeps us thinking all the time, and that we have to make sense of everything. So this is we get to kind of, when your brain is formed, your eyes are the first thing formed off of it in the womb. So we get like that direct access into the nervous system. But our brain and our spinal cord, that is our central nervous system.
Yep.
Everything that comes off of that's the peripheral nervous system. But your fascia tissue and your muscles and everything in your body, everything is created to read your environment and give your brain that information. So your nervous system, I always say your nervous system runs the show. Like, what's your nervous system doing? Right. And so, because for every thought and emotion, we have a response in our nervous system for it. That's why when we get excited, we're like, ah, or when you hear some bad news and you get that like gut punch feeling.
Yeah. Oh, that's a terrible feeling. That flush that you feel, you're like, oh.
Yes. And and the getting nauseous at things when we're trying to think about if you're getting emotional and you're trying not to, that thing in your throat, right? And my jaw gets tight too. So those are all just your body responding to the messaging running through your nervous system. Because I don't know if you're familiar with like vagus nerve, polyvagal theory. So that's what we have, our vagus nerves running right through that and then going out and connecting into all of our organs.
Right.
So that's, the different phases of the vagus nerve one's going to try to shut you down and protect you. When it gets activated, that sympathetic part, but then it's called ventral vagal is, I'm here and I'm in the room and I can feel and I can manage these without needing the other parts to come in and take care of it. Does that make sense?
Yeah, for sure it does.
Yeah.
So I'm trying to just, because my small tiny brain can barely comprehend this stuff. But
tell me, I'm so used to talking about these subjects. I forget sometimes, like, even words like aren't normal words that people say all the time. And so please stop me. I'll try to be mindful of it. But if there's like, hey, can you like give us like a more simplified version of that?
Yeah.
I could do that too.
Yeah. So you'll start talking. I'll be like, hey, get those smart words out of here. we don't do that here on my show. What are you doing?
Well, they're just unfamiliar words.
Right.
You know, but it's how my brain operates. So
of course.
Yeah.
Yeah, of course. So when you're doing EMDR and the brain spotting therapy, how do you, is there ever like a pushback from your clients? Because the brain always wants to protect itself, of course, and there's always like a guard up. And I've seen this, I've heard hypnotherapists talk about this as well, where it's like you're only able to have a successful session if you just let your body do it, if you give it permission, because your body inadvertently is like, no, it's like a guard. So do you ever experience this pushback from clients?
Absolutely. And that is exactly right. Like, even like a lot of like hypnotherapy, it's doing the same, like a lot of people, I mean, a lot of us have experienced like a hypnotist at like a show where they're putting everybody asleep and having them dance around or do funny things. That is one version of that. But really, when you're doing like clinical hypnosis for mental health, it's accessing that deeper part of the brain that we normally don't have access to.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's why for some people it won't work. Some people very easily. It's, to me, that's a more sign of like their openness and willingness of their brain to let that happen, to give them access to that. So I definitely have a lot of times people are coming and reaching out. By the time they are on my couch, they've tried a bunch of other things that didn't work, or they're tired of talk therapy. They're like, I cannot talk about this anymore. And they're
Yes.
looking for something else. And so they're normally ready and willing for the brain spotting. They kind of come to me for that. But then their brain is the one protesting.
Yes. Right.
Because I call all of those things the things that we do, like we distract. We do all these things to not feel, right?
Mm-hmm.
We even like the things, I describe it like a layer of an onion. Like we want to look at that bulb in the middle, but we've got all these layers to go through. And so some of those are going to be the negative thinking, or if we're a perfectionist, am I doing this right?
Mm-hmm.
Those thoughts get in the way, but and keep us from trying to get to what we really want to look at. So I always tell, I'm like, what's your go-to way of coping when you feel things or stuff starts getting serious? It's like I keep myself distracted. I have messaging around like I can't feel feelings because they're weak, right?
Yep.
All of these things, and the perfectionist is I'm not okay, so I'm gonna then dive into this perfection part of myself it diverts it. And so all these things that we come up with to not have to feel and deal with our stuff, well, we're purposely now trying to, when we're doing, like brain spotting or EMDR. So your brains, those are all skills. They're skills that are helping you. That's why we keep doing them. They just may not be the most helpful ones. So I will tell clients, like, they're like, I don't know. I just keep thinking I'm doing this wrong. My response is either going to be, notice that even your own therapy process, you feel like you're getting wrong.
Yeah.
Or I'm going to say, can you ask your body, like thank your body for trying to help you? Because you've got some really amazing skills you've developed and you've needed them. Can you ask your body just to give you a little bit of space and let it know we don't need that right now? So sometimes I am actually like trying to talk with the brain body of the client when we're hitting those layers. Just sometimes the permission giving gives us a little bit of room to then start digging.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Like I've done some brain body work as well. You feel crazy when you do that stuff because you're like you're asking for permission from your brain, and it's just a weird place to be in because you always think of your brain as just part of you. You think, I don't even know how to put this into words, but this is just from experience. Like you never take into account that your brain is an organ or something else. You just think it's part of you, like you're a toy, and each little piece is just inside of you. It's like it's nothing else.
Whole.
You're not whole. It's just there's a bunch of different parts inside of you, and you're something else that just happens to have these inside of you.
Yeah.
So when you're doing the brain body work, you're like, what the hell am I doing?
Yeah. And I think about this when it comes to when you're a doctor and you're like, something's wrong with my stomach or the kidney, something like you do scans and imaging to take a look. The brain is the only thing that we don't take a look at when there's something. I mean, we look for tumors and that sort of thing, or if we're having seizures, it's all kept into like a medical, aspect. But when you have like things like depression or anxiety or OCD, addiction, trauma shows up on brain scans. Chronic pain shows up on brain scans.
Right.
And so it's an important thing that it hasn't, I'm hoping we're heading in that direction, but that I'm more of the belief like mental health is such a scientific thing that you can look at, that it takes away all, there's, just so much like attached to, I'm having struggles with mental health and I have to hide it. But if we had cancer or a broken leg, we wouldn't be ashamed of that. And if you think about our emotions and our thoughts, there's a reason. If you think horribly about yourself, I guarantee you we can trace it. You weren't born with that belief about yourself. It happened somehow. Right.
Yeah.
And so you have to pay attention to all of that. And we wouldn't shame ourselves for other things, our processes our body naturally does. I kind of joke with clients. I'm like, do you get mad at yourself when you pee?
Yeah.
And they're like, oh no. And I'm like, so why do you get upset or angry with yourself for having feelings and emotions? Because that is another natural process that your body is doing. The anxiety and all the dysfunction and unhelpful things we do that get in our way, that is all the push up against not feeling that stuff. That I was no one's ever died from feeling anxious in their body. And it's when we try to turn from it to avoid it, we're reiterating and strengthening that message or belief of don't feel your feelings. That's bad.
Yeah.
And the feeling is actually still there. And that's when it gets stuck in the body because we turned from it. We didn't finish it and complete the emotion. Yeah.
I'm picturing like you have to go to the bathroom and you're just screaming at yourself every time. You're like, why? Not again.
Yeah. But I love that. But it's the same thing. Like we think that's silly, but we try to shut ourselves down, the feelings all the time.
It's so strange because, when you're looking at the medical field, like depression and trauma and stuff are very real, of course. And they're like, yeah, right there on the scan, it's there. But for some reason in society, regardless of the scientific research and scientific, results that have proven that these are real things, there's always that, no, that's make believe garbage. It's strange because it's there. It's on paper. It's a real thing. And most people go through something, but for some reason there's still a dark cloud over all of these things.
Oh yeah. Yeah. And that's what I hope that people can start seeing it. And because like I said, the mental health and the things that we experience, you can see it as just like a natural scientific thing instead of just like these, just kind of have these weird nuances of that it's bad. And the more I think because when I talk to clients about this and like, so here's what's actually like when that happens, here's like some stuff on how your body's handling that, like some scientific knowledge there. And it takes a lot of that shame, or just when you do group therapy and you're like, oh, there's other people that experience this. That in itself is like so great. We're not alone. And so when it takes all that clutter around like shaming ourselves or thinking negatively because we have had our experiences and responded to them.
Right.
And depending on how we responded, it's what we knew at the time. It's what we knew to get and try to be okay. So the work is one, resolving the stuff that's kind of stuck there in the body, letting the body let go of it, but then learning there's other ways to handle when we get upset or have things happen. We've learned a different way than what we did before. Yeah.
Right. And also like all these reactions that each individual has, or all these thoughts that you have when something bad goes on. Like you mentioned before, you picked it up somewhere and you almost don't ever take that into account. Like I didn't realize some of the thought or some of the actions I would do towards a bad thought or something bad happening in terms of like the thoughts I would have, just casual passing by, like when I swam, I would have a bad result and I'd be like, oh, I'm just not a swimmer. Like I wasn't built to be one. And it was just a casual, like, I was like, oh, whatever. Like,
Yeah.
this
Just
isn't what I'm
kind of.
supposed to do. But
Mhm.
when I was a kid, I was like, this is what I have to do. So somewhere in between those, it didn't just magically change. I picked up
Right.
something, and
Hmm.
I didn't realize these things until my therapist was like, why do you think that way? And I was like, I actually don't know.
I
It's
know.
strange. You
Hmm.
never take it into account.
With how many things do we do that with, though? What I
Exactly.
mean, you can go to deeper levels of why do I believe the religion that I do?
Hmm.
Why is my spirituality? Why do I do this or that? Um, or it can just be why do I eat this food, or why do I buy this brand of laundry detergent?
Yep.
It's, well, I don't know. That's just kind of what we always did.
Hmm.
And so that to me, that's like step one, is to start noticing it, but then start challenging it, and then start giving yourself more opportunity to explore it.
Right.
Hmm.
Do you almost have do you have clients sometimes almost go through like an identity crisis when you point these things
Absolutely.
out? Yeah, I
Hmm.
can imagine because I've done it to myself, especially like during this pandemic. Like, I
Yeah.
have a select few, like, this is a really light example, I guess, but I have these select few shows or podcasts that I listen to, and for some
Hmm.
reason it feels like I've known them forever because it's
Yeah.
just in the pandemic my brain has been like, this is like, you follow these people, and then I
Hmm.
take a step back and I'm like, I had no idea what any of these shows were like a month, like 3 months ago.
Right.
And then you try to think about life before it and you're like, I thought this was, I just, it feels like I've watched these shows my whole life. It's
Yeah.
strange. And then you just sit there
Hmm.
and you're like, what am I doing?
Hopefully it's helpful though in some way. Because
Oh
we,
yeah, for sure.
yeah. Have you branched outside of those three?
Of course. Yeah. No, definitely. But it's just such a strange feeling when you're like, I feel like I've known these people forever. It
Oh
actually,
yeah.
you can use the same for like friends or
Oh
people you
yeah.
just met. You're like, I know this person, and it's like you
Hmm.
met them last week. Like when
Hmm.
someone gets into a relationship really quick, like you're one of your friends,
Hmm.
and you're like, what are you doing? You're moving in with them. You met them a week ago. They're like, I've known them forever. It's like, no, you haven't.
Yeah. And that's this is a little bit along those same lines, but something that is interesting. So watching, um, like when we watch, do you ever watch the same show? We find comfort in like
Yes.
rewatching shows.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's that same familiarity of it, right? But
Mm-hmm.
so if you tend to be an anxious person, and I'm speaking about myself with this as well, but I watch, I'll just like pick a show and that I've watched before, and it's like always in the background, or if I sit down to watch it, and sometimes the thought about trying to start a new show or watch it like a movie I've never seen, I have to mentally prepare for it because you're
Yep.
taking in new information. And I think we all do this. And so sometimes our capacity for it takes energy and effort of our body and our brain to take in new information, because that's what we're always doing. And I think in the state of like pandemic right now, it is triggered everyone's stuff. Whatever we had, it just kind of put a layer on it and like up the ante.
Mm.
And so that we're constantly scanning for safety. Our system's designed that way. It's designed to kind of hold on a little more to the negative experiences and the fears, because that's what it's designed to do, is keep you safe,
Right.
let you survive. And so when the good thing happens, our brain sometimes like, okay, that's not something I need to hold on to,
Yeah.
hold too tight on, because it's not telling me how to be safe, but it is. But
Mm-hmm.
our system won't quite hold on to those positive things the way that it will the negative, because those are saying our safety is being threatened.
Mm-hmm.
So we're just kind of, and so circling it back to the shows, that's like watching things repetitive that kind of let you kind of get out of your brain for a little bit, but it's just familiar. It helps anxiety in that
Mm-hmm.
way. So it's
Right.
kind of crazy.
Yeah, it's so funny how like you could, let's say you just graduated school and you're like, that's so awesome, and your brain's like, yeah, that's great, but like you had this bad feeling like 4 days ago, and you should really focus on it.
and they're just checking up on you. Like it's trying to help you. And you're like, stop. No, that's not focus
Oh,
on this good thing, please.
yes. It has to be a very purposeful thing, I think sometimes. I think that's what's at the core. You hear people like practicing gratitude.
Yes.
That it's just a way to bring things that are in the foreground to the forefront. There's so many things just are always there, and just can we bring a little bit more attention to it so we can be aware of it, because it helps in those harder times when we have some consolidation with the gratefulness of the positive things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people too I know I experience this, and I know a lot of my friends do too, but I think our brain tries to make us the main character in all of our lives. So you just see what's going on with you, and you don't see anything around you. Like for me, I never paid attention. Like I had great friends, I have a great family, and like things were going well for me. Never cared. I never paid attention to it until I sat down and like did the gratitude stuff. And I was like, oh, my brain still thinks I'm the main character, but there's a lot of great supporting characters here too.
Yes, absolutely.
We
Yes.
can focus on them.
I love that. I mean, and sometimes we can get so focused on the other characters, because that could be a way for us to not have to deal with the yuck, that we have. So it can work both ways, I think.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
So when let's say your brain has something packaged in your midbrain, and let's say it's like a trauma, something involving trauma. So your brain, does your body react to those thoughts still, even though you can't acknowledge that they're there?
Yeah, that's a great question. Yeah. So they are our memories. And so that is, let me first define how I think of trauma. It's anything that's had a lasting impact on us physically, spiritually, mentally, and emotionally.
Right.
So we think of like the bigger things like an assault or a natural disaster, but it's other things. I mean, think about it's unlimited of what that could be if it just whatever has an impact on us. Sometimes it's someone making one statement to us is stuck, right? It could be, there's things that, like when we are very young, I think like 1 or 2, our brain's not fully capable of holding on to memory and storing it because our brain's still developing. And so we don't quite have, so it gets stored in very pre-verbal holding, like body memory. That's a lot of way, because it, hasn't fully formed, but that's what the capacity it has, is storing memory. So when you look at babies that were in orphanages for a very long time and not getting picked up and held, that's creating their attachment. That's the way they, at that very young age. And so it's interesting to kind of take a look at those different aspects, and it's important to have that in consideration when you're looking at like, how am I in this world right now? Yeah.
Yeah. I saw this TikTok the other day, and it was really funny because it was this guy talking about how he just woke up one day as a kid. He was like, my consciousness just kind of kicked in when I was like 6 years old in a grocery store.
Wow.
And I was like, that is so true. Like you never, like you don't remember anything as a kid.
That is awesome.
Yeah, I know. I don't know if he was joking or being serious, but like it really makes you like, you're like, yeah, that's your consciousness just kind of it just kicks in one day. It's so strange.
Yeah, remind me of the question you asked a minute ago. I think I don't even know if I answered it. I started talking about something else.
Oh yeah, sorry. I love going on tangents, so I
do
hooked
too,
right on.
But I have like ADHD, so I'll go down a rabbit, and I'm like, I don't know. Wait, where do I start?
You're like, wait a minute. I didn't answer any part of that question, and nothing I'm saying is relevant. Yeah,
Yes.
I've been there.
Yeah.
No, I asked if, let's say you have some trauma stored up in your midbrain, even though we can't acknowledge it or register it or see it, quote unquote, hypothetically, I guess.
Okay.
Does our body still react? to it?
Yes. Okay, good. Yes. So we store that information like in those fragmented ways.
Mm-hmm.
Think about your five senses. Things get stored and pulled in.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why we can smell things. Like if we've been in a fire, like that smell can trigger that memory.
Right.
Or it's you commonly hear like PTSD in like soldiers. They're now back
Yeah.
home, but they hear a backfire of a car and they like duck down, right? So we have all that stored in there, and that's how it's like unconsciously our brain, it's there, our brain's going to recognize it. And so those are trauma responses. So that can be a number of things if you're looking at all your senses, like the way that shows up. I tend to, our experiences give us messaging about ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
So if you think about, we kind of walk around with the filters that just keep getting hung up, on our screen here, that we're filtering the world through our relationships, social media, everything we do, our just regular communication with people. So those experiences, they may be tucked away in the, in the midbrain, but if it's, I'm not good enough, got put on there, right? So that active belief of I'm not good enough, or I'm not lovable, or I'm bad, or I should have done something, all those things, that's how you see it, I think, like in a very tangible way, like showing up and having an effect. But then it's in the body as well. But so I work with chronic pain and illness. There's a lot of times when we resolve trauma, the body gets better too.
Right.
If you live in that, what's in the body is in the brain, what's in the brain is in the body. That's a tagline for brain spotting. That it's, when we touch the back of our hand, we're feeling that in our brain. Like messaging ran up through our nervous system, through our fascia tissue, and told our brain something's touching the back of your hand. That's why we can pull away so fast when, we smash our finger or touch something hot. We're like, right? But that happened in the brain.
Mm-hmm.
But so then that creates, say if we had that, boom, there is a memory now. There's a body memory of burning our hand.
Right.
So you think you're going to, when you see those things again, that's what's going to, your body remembers, don't touch that, that's hot. That's like on a very primal level, how our alarm system, our safety detection system in our body is always trying to watch out for those things and trying to tuck it in as, okay, now we're learning more what safe looks like. But what happens, it's not just those external experiences, it's the internal ones too. If our body's designed to keep us safe and it's constantly scanning for what's unsafe, when we're younger and we don't get our needs met, we're not cared for, we don't learn to trust, we learn the intimacy, we get taken advantage of, we can't explore the world, or we're wrong or bad if we don't get it right. Mm-hmm. All those things, that's your body brain is taking in that messaging. So what gets wired in the system at a very early age can be, don't try for connection because that's scary. You get hurt or you get left. So then we start to recognize bids for closeness in our relationships. That feels scary. And you've got that wiring. Mm-hmm. It's already telling. So the message isn't just about literal, like, don't touch things that's hot, right? It's about everything. And that's when you really start paying attention to it's different for everybody. We all have some common experiences, but we may experience it differently. But we all have, like, I like to get curious, and that's one of the first places I start with clients is, so what's the narrative you're living in right now? What do you feel like is true? Because I want to disprove it.
Right.
If we're living with, I'm not enough, when things happen or you don't get something right that you want to do, or people just literally just straight up tell you you're not good enough, it matches up with what you're already holding for yourself, and you agree with it. And that's why it just strengthens that, versus when we're able to unlock and release and process the things that even put that there in the first place, then when someone says you're not good enough, that doesn't match anymore. You're like, yeah, I am. That's probably something on you.
Right.
We don't take responsibility for it anymore. And we know that we know who we are here. And that's when, going back to the identity thing. Yeah, I've had clients that have said, when I started doing this and just really slowing down, I realized none of my thoughts are my own. They're all messaging from parents and church and school and experiences. They're like, none of them are my own. I don't know what I think about anything. I'm like, good.
Wow.
Now we get to figure that out.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not me as a therapist, my knowing, like myself, or even what I know from training and studying and doing this, my knowing does not help the client know.
Right.
I can know, because I can say, oh, you're a beautiful, wonderful person that is good enough. I may be able to know that about them, but if they don't know it, that's not going to matter. I have to help them know it.
Mm-hmm.
They have to get there, and their body and brain have to agree and know it.
Yeah.
And I'll tell clients, I'm like, I want you to disagree with me if I say something that doesn't match with you. I'm here to be curious and to learn. They're the expert in the room, not me.
Mm-hmm.
There's
Right.
no way for me to be an expert on them. I can be, have cool trainings and, all the knowledge of how to engage with that. But my job is I need you to know. So me telling you is not gonna do that.
Mm-hmm.
So that's where some of these brain-based therapies that take the therapist out of the lead role are so helpful.
Yeah.
Like it's just with brain spotting, it works a lot on the uncertainty principle, which kind of comes from that stance of, I don't know, like I don't know what's best for this person. They're going to know, and it's that curiosity. But even like sometimes clients may say, I don't know why I think this, and so a therapist might ask a bunch of questions to try to help them figure that out. Right. So I don't need to know. I just need the client to know. So I'm going to slow down. I'm going to attune with them and share space with them. But doing something like brain-based therapies, I'm going to just create that space for the client to kind of get still and get to know their own body, brain, what's going on. And
Right.
they start to meaning make. How I might make sense of something may not be how they need to. And your body and your brain knows how to do that. It's an instinct it knows to do and can do. We just get in the way.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Because we try to make sense of it sometimes.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's kind of like, I don't know. I can't get this or do this, or I don't know why. And I'm like, yeah, I don't know. We know that you're feeling this way right now. Maybe we don't know why. What does that feel like to not know? That's kind of that uncertainty from my end. Like, I don't know. I don't feel anything. What does that feel like to not feel anything?
Mm-hmm.
Right? How are you experiencing not connecting like that with yourself? And then we normally get somewhere.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's
a different way of doing therapy.
Right. Yeah. No, I love this way more because I've had my ups and downs with therapy, and if people listen to the show, they know, because I like to share about, I went to 7 different therapists, and the 7th one was the only one that worked. But
Wow.
a lot of the people that didn't work out was because they tried to just answer things for me and solved it for me, as opposed to just listening. And I was always like, what are you doing? Like, they would try to explain why I'm feeling that way. I'm like, that's not it at all.
Yeah, I don't have any idea why you're feeling that way. I either want you to try to explain it to me,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
so that in that process, you start to, I'm sure if you've done therapy work, I'll hear clients say something. They're like, that's the first time I said that out loud. That doesn't feel right. Like just saying it out loud.
Mm-hmm.
Me, I witness. I
Right.
show up, attune, hold space, and witness. And that's, I have client, like when you're doing brain spotting, you can talk as much or as little as you want as the client. So some, that there's some clients like to say everything because it helps them process, but I have some that will spend a whole session in silence.
Mm.
And but we are very much connected and with each other in the room when that's happening. By me, I'm doing it right now. I rock
Yeah.
all the
Right.
time. And especially when I'm doing some breath work while they're processing and while I'm sitting with them. And so as I just breathe my body, and they'll say, I know I was over here, but I could see you out of the corner of my eye. Like my rocking was just keeping a rhythm for them and awareness that I'm not alone. I'm here in the room.
Okay.
And that's a big part of the therapy process too. Because how did it feel when you had a therapist telling you how you felt?
Awful.
Yeah. Why did it feel awful?
Because I didn't know them. I was like, because it was always the first session, and they would be like, "You're feeling this way because," I'm like, "You don't know anything about me. Like, I told you a story of what happened, but like,
Mm-hmm.
you don't know a single part of my life at all. You just know
Yeah.
my side of it."
Mm-hmm.
So it was kind of like I would always get like that, like, "How dare you?" Like that kind of feeling. Be like, the
Mm-hmm.
nerve.
So I just out of curiosity, when have you experienced that outside of therapy?
Oh, all the time.
Someone
Like,
telling you what you think and what you know and
yeah.
assuming.
Well, I've got the perfect example because, and people know this. I graduated like by the time this comes out last month. Graduated last month from university, but when I was applying to sciences, my science teacher in grade 12, he pulled me aside and he was like, "Listen, no matter what you go into uni for, do not go into science." He's like, "You're not good at it and you won't do well." And I was like, so in that moment, I was like, who are you to tell me that? So then, of
Yeah.
course, I applied to science. But it was the exact same feeling. And then another one, and these are my two favorite stories because that one, it's like, well, I graduated, so how does that feel? And then the other one was when I was going for swimming recruitment to different universities to try and like get on a swim team. The one school I really wanted to go to, which ultimately became the school I went to, the coach at the end of the recruiting weekend, he was like, "You're not making this team." He's like, you're not good enough, and we're not going to let you on." And there's no bad blood between me and the teacher and this coach, by the way. Like, it's all love, of
Mm-hmm.
course. But when he said that, I was like, "Oh, I'm making this team." I was like, "You can't tell me that." I was like, "You have no idea what I bring to a team. You just saw me
Mm-hmm.
train for 2 days." So then ultimately
Awesome.
I made the team and became captain. But those are my two favorite stories because yeah,
That
no
is
big deal.
awesome.
And then he doesn't coach there anymore. Um but those are the two stories where the feeling was mutual, in the sense of when the therapist told me, "Yeah, you're feeling
Mm-hmm.
this way." I'm like, "No, you can't tell me that. You have no
Mm-hmm.
right to tell me how I feel. You don't know what I've been
Yeah.
through."
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And that's why, obviously you didn't stay working with those therapists that were doing that. And that's exactly, a perfect example of kind of why approaching it from I don't know,
Hmm.
I have to be curious and help you figure that out. Like, or else you could shut people down like it did for you.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
Mm-hmm.
That's a way
Yeah.
better way of approaching it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's fun. To me, it's fun, especially. So there's some research around like where trauma happens in the brain,
Hmm.
and we know it's stored in a certain area, but I've read some things where there's an area in the brain that holds intuition, but when we experience a lot of trauma, that part of the brain can get kind of shut down. So it's common when I ask a question, how do you feel, or what do you think? It's I don't know. Literally, the frustration of I don't know that clients have is important and big, and that some of the work is helping them find that intuitive part again, because we've lost sight of that, to where it's those voices are always someone else's, it's not theirs, and they're so unfamiliar with what their voice sounds like. So that's a big part of the work too.
That is terrifying. When that realization where you're like, every thought I have or every reaction I have has nothing, it is not me.
Yeah.
That's so scary.
Yeah. I do work with like spirituality, religious trauma. And so when clients get to a point where they've experienced something to a point where they know that wasn't helpful for them, and then they realize there's a lot of messaging of kind of like you described, like I'm not sure why, and so then that's a turning point of, well, do you want to explore that? And they do, but it's a very scary process, because that spirituality is a whole nother layer laid, into mental health, and that's where a lot of messaging happens, around any religion, of the supposed to, and here's how, fundamentally, where life and death stuff, gets mixed in there, fears around that. And so when we are kind of to the point where let's wipe the slate clean, I'm like, if you end up thinking and believing the same way you did when you got here, great. But let's wipe the slate clean, and then let's figure out and explore things, and what makes sense, what feels right, that helps you be in this world. And so if you think everything when you first started, that's great, but now you know why. It's because it makes sense to you, it agrees with you and your morals and your standards and your views of life and how you're in it. Like, you have some really consolidated things around that, to where it's not just another voice. It's not elders always saying, talking about these things. You actually know, well, I believe this, and this is how it applies to me, and how I interact with that. So that's, as I would say, that's what came to mind when you said that must be scary for clients when they feel like that identity part. And because that's a lot of times our identity's wrapped up in these things. Even trying to get clients almost like a buy-in to do trauma work, part of that is, if we've, like with developmental trauma, experienced it throughout our life, like we're always like dealing with these things, these big things that happen all the time, it becomes a part of the identity. Like, I'm in survival mode, and this is just who I am. I'm someone who has gone through this or this or this. And that's not necessarily our identity, but the thought of, if I process and let go of all the stuff I carry around all the time, then what do I do? And clients get scared. So if we talk in a session, like, okay, let's start doing brain spotting next session. They're like, yeah, okay. And I'm like, but be careful, because more things will happen that will make you gotta cancel the session. Right. You're more open to, I got to do this or that, or I'm not feeling too great, maybe I shouldn't come in, because that, I think on a subconscious level, we can be afraid to look at it, to feel, deeply, but to resolve and let go. And I think another big fear is, I'm afraid I'm going to remember something that I don't, and it's going to be this big, huge thing that adds to everything else I have to try to get over. So right. that fear is really prevalent as well.
Yeah, like something that comes up and you're like, I didn't even think about that. I haven't thought about that forever, and now I have it in my head. When things like that happen, like let's say you're going through the trauma process, and something does pop up, and you're like, oh, I forgot that happened, and it kind of just is overwhelming for a client. How do you take the client through healing that portion? Like when they're caught completely off guard.
By like a new memory they had never remembered before, or just
Yeah.
like these just feelings and stuff they've been shoving down pretty well are like finally coming through.
Kind of both, I guess, because I like when you've been suppressing feelings for so long and you finally address them, you're like, oh wow, that there's a lot of them. It's kind of like every now and then you're just kind of like, put that in the back burner, and then eventually
Yeah.
it's like there's so many in the back burner. You're like, oh,
Mhm.
what? I keep doing this. So I guess for both, like the overwhelming
Yeah.
feeling when you're finally like, wow, there's a lot of stuff in here, and then also the overwhelming feeling where you're like, oh wow, that's in there. I don't even remember that.
So I mean, just because therapy might be a little different. We're not talking about talk therapy, but a lot of times that stuff's going to come up while we might be doing like brain spotting or EMDR.
Right.
So there's a lot on the front end that my clients like always know. I might, if they start to feel overwhelmed, I've already kind of done prep work with them, but I might just remind them in the processing, I'm here if you need any help.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I'm not going to immediately try to make them feel like calm them down, because think about our friends are well-meaning, but when they ask you, you're telling them something, they're like, you're fine, you're going to be okay, don't think that way about yourself. It's like it's helpful, it's how they know to be helpful, but it's really that internal messaging happening. It's like strengthening that I can't have these big feelings, I have to be okay.
Right.
It can feel invalidating, because sometimes we just need to feel like shit. Right?
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
we just need to feel our feelings. And I mean, a memory comes up, but when a good friend of mine, we had brunch one day, and I was telling her about something, and she kind of said like, don't think that way, you're, and just being very, very positive and uplifting. And I just said, hey, I was like, I just need to like feel crappy about this, and I just need you to hear me.
Yeah.
And I was like, I know I'll feel better. I was like, just talking it out and knowing you hear me helps me feel better. I know here in my head that that's not true, but in my gut right now, that feels true for me. And she's like, thank you for showing me how to be supportive and show up with you.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that was just a really good example that came to mind of kind of, so you can't, as a therapist, you can't be that person that's going to give them additional messaging that what they're feeling is wrong or that they can't feel it. I'm here if you need it, if you
Right.
need help. And there's things we can do that kind of helps the system calm down a little bit. But I might say, can you stand it? Notice that. I'm not going to say, tell me what's going on. I may not even know, I don't need to know in order for them to. So notice, how's your body responding? Notice that. And a lot of that sitting and waiting in the openness to explore is how we start to know things for ourselves.
Right.
You could be curious about even just asking the question, why do I think this? Sometimes talking it out to someone of, hey, I notice I've been thinking this, but it helps you kind of start getting curious and digging a little deeper. But if you were to just sit there and be curious within your body, you'd get some answers.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's, I guess, I don't know if that answers your question of what I do when people have big things come up. It's, what do you notice about that? What's like, what are the thoughts or feel? Let's explore it.
Mm-hmm.
Do you need any help? I'm here. Like, they can have full breakdown in front of me. Me being a calm, like, person, my nervous system being a regulatory like thing for them in the room, I'm gonna help them co-regulate by might look at each other in the eyes and just breathe.
Right.
Without any words. And then it kind of gets to a place where it feels tolerable. And I'll be like, do you want to keep going? Yeah. Or sometimes it's no. Okay, we don't have to. I always let clients know in the room with me, you are always going to get whatever you need and ask for. You have to ask for it.
Mm-hmm.
Now, at the beginning, we're going to learn what that looks like, but then you have to ask. And so that's teaching them, because a lot of times we don't know how to ask, or we go about it in really weird ways, thinking we're asking for something, but our behaviors are doing something different.
Right.
I mean, think of like passive aggressive comments. That's the best example. Because it's too vulnerable, or we don't know how, for whatever reason, like to identify what we need and to ask for it. That either feels too scary. I can't get what I need. I'm not allowed to have needs. So, but we will do things to try to get that need met. And sometimes that's a passive aggressive comment with couples, and everyone always identifies. But if you're the one that gets upset and rolls over in bed because there's an argument happening, and you roll over, you're trying to say, I'm hurt, I'm very hurt, or I'm very upset. But your body language says, don't talk to me, I'm done. But you're sitting there going, I wish they would just like come put their arm around me and hug me.
I've been through that.
Right?
I've been through that exact thing. I'll flip over. I'm like, why are you not paying attention to me right now? And they're like, what?
Yes. But that's what we're doing one thing because that feels safer.
Right.
But we're hoping like it will create connection is really what we're trying to get out of that. Instead of, that feels really hurtful, what you just said. I really need to feel close with you or understand you more. But it feels scary for me to stay in that, because that, whatever just said, made me feel like yucky inside. But we can't sit with that gross feeling. So we do things.
Right.
I remember the first time, I've been married and divorced. But I remember the first time I had an argument with my husband at the time, and not the first argument, but I'd said something that I recognized pretty quickly. Like, I said that out of hurt. And I said that to hurt him because I needed him to know how hurt I was feeling. And I was like, oh, I have to go apologize. And so it took everything I had, because I was like, if I go say I'm sorry, then my feeling was like, he's just going to lay into me. He's going to, like with the, yeah, of course that was wrong, and like point out and dig into that shame more, but he didn't. I was just like, I'm sorry I said that. I shouldn't have. That was totally just to hurt your feelings because I'm hurt. And he was like, it's okay. Thanks for apologizing. And I was like, what?
Yep. Yeah.
Just forgive me. He was like, yeah. He's like, oh, thanks for saying that. And I was like, I remember that was like oh my God, I can actually like take responsibility for things and say I'm sorry, and it doesn't mean that I'm bad. Like, so those were positive experiences, being able to get that, in that relationship of, I can say I'm sorry and it's not going to be used against me. Because I think we've all probably gotten in arguments and we realize we're wrong in the middle of it, but we're like, ship's sailing now. Taking it to the end.
Fully committed.
Even though you're like, I know what I'm saying is wrong. It's that feeling of, why can't we, it's vulnerability. I can't say I'm wrong, because then what does that mean? But our past experiences tell us that's okay or not, right?
Right.
So just the more opportunity we can give ourselves to get those types of experiences and messaging, it helps us prove the ones that are there wrong. Those messages that are there causing us problems. What can we do or engage in to get the experiences that prove that wrong? That's how we know something different.
Right. So,
yeah.
So for people,
sorry.
What's that?
I said that was a tangent. Sorry.
Oh no, that was great though. No, that was perfect.
Yeah.
For anybody listening, let's say they're going through something, or they're starting to realize that the thoughts that they're experiencing aren't their own. And of course, it's a very terrifying realization, but they're like on the brink of fully realizing it, or like they're starting to see little Easter eggs in their life where they're like, that didn't feel like me. where can these people, where can they start in terms of finally getting to a place where all their thoughts are their own, or they start to actually feel like themselves?
Yeah. So there's so many ways to answer this question. Like, I know I will tell clients just to start, I'll use sometimes an example about the movie The Holiday. I don't know if you've seen that. It's a Christmas movie
The
with,
Holiday. Oh, with Vince Vaughn?
no,
No, that's Four Christmases.
it's
The Holiday.
Cameron Diaz and Jack Black and Kate Winslet.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, I love that movie. Right.
Yes. And so there was a scene in the movie where the old director guys having Kate Winslet watch all these old movies. And she's then having a conversation about it and saying, I've been watching these movies with all these great heroine actresses in it. Well, she's there because she's going, left because of a relationship that went, bad. And she's like, I should be the leading lady in my life. And that just stuck with me. And so I'll tell clients about that, that scene, but then I pose the question, are you the leading, person in your life? Do you have the leading role? Because if we sit down in that context and think, what has a lead role for us? Sometimes we're not the lead. Sometimes it's addiction. Sometimes it's a partner. Sometimes it's our work. It can be multiple things. And we're just not ever, we should be the lead role in our life. And then all these other things are supporting. Right. And so even just start asking the question and notice from when you order a coffee at the coffee shop, or you're picking out your clothes to get ready in the morning. Is this me being the lead? Because think about, we get dressed for other people, we can pick out what we wear, or because we want to have a certain style because that's what's in, or I always just remember, they're just clothes that you cover your body with. Right. Mm-hmm. And so it's, what are you being the lead? That helps you start realizing how much influences other things and how much are we influencing that. Well, then we may realize that, we're not the lead. So then it's when we start give yourself the option. So it might be, think the Runaway Bride movie where she likes eggs. I don't know if you've seen that movie. So it's got Julia Roberts. Julia Roberts is an older movie, and
I'm sure I've seen it.
But she gets engaged and never gets married. So she's in these relationships, but she molds into that person, their life. Mm-hmm. They kind of did this thing where she likes different styles of eggs. She just eats whatever the person she's with type of egg. And so there's a scene where she's trying all these different types of eggs, different ways they're cooked. And then she's like, I think it was poached eggs maybe, but she's like, I hate all the other types of eggs. And so, because she gave herself opportunity to try, and she noticed what she liked. And so it's use that across the board. Try dressing different, see how you like it. Test it out. If you think you've taken a look at it and said, I think I'm doing this not solely for me, but for other people, then start giving yourself the options just to try it out. And you can do it on bigger scales too. Sometimes I'm working with clients that are trying to make a big life decision, or if you're looking at religion, those type of things. I'm like, just because we think or we try something doesn't mean that's where we're landing. So live a week as if you've made the decision for this. Maybe try it as like you made the other decision, and play it out and see how that feels. And so when you're looking at spirituality and people feel like, they're like, I don't know, that blank slate place. Read about things, learn about things. Don't get your own information so you can make an informed decision, basically. But it's it's like, go do some of these different things that we've always just kind of said no, but we didn't know why we were saying no. Try it out and see what works. Why do you like it?
Mm-hmm.
So that's, I think, the first step into being able to change those types of things, is giving the opportunity to
Right.
try it. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. That hit different because I I'm not in a relationship anymore, but when I was in the couple that I was in, it, like I kind of put all of how I felt or what I wanted to the side, and my
Mm-hmm.
brain still thought I was the main character or the leading actor,
Mm-hmm.
but my life didn't reciprocate that feeling.
Yeah.
So looking back now, like, it makes sense why half of you was unhappy all the time, because
Mm-hmm.
you're like, I'm the main character, but nothing in my life is mine. It's a weird feeling.
Yeah. I'll give you this example that I think clients, when I used to work with couples, I would use hula hoops. I
Hmm.
would have 3 hula hoops on the floor and tell them, like, each one has their own hula hoop, and then there's a relationship hula hoop. And so I'll say, go stand in, where do you think the most attention, is? And so you'll have maybe 2 couples, like, or both people go get in the relationship hula hoop. But I was like, well, if those are your hula hoops, there's nothing in it. There's nothing holding on to it.
Mm,
Like, I can pull those away from you. Right.
right.
So then it might be they go stand in one of the partner's hula hoops. We lose connection. If you're the one that went and stood in someone else's, you lose sight of your own, but the relationship gets pulled away too.
Right.
So it's having one foot in the other. And so the relationship may be my relationship with a certain person or addiction or any of those things. You've got to stay rooted in your own hula hoop. And then we put our feet in. We don't let people come stand in ours. If you
Right.
think about, this is getting more into boundaries. I'm a very visual person, so I'm always describing things visually.
No,
But
it's perfect. Yeah.
if you walk around with the hula hoop holding it up against your waist, think about if you were to then go try to hug someone. You can either drop your hula hoop and just go wrap your arms around them, or think about if you both have hula hoops and they can bump up against each other and there's going to keep some space between you. Versus what if it gets pushed up against your stomach and your hula hoop's still there, but you've got more space behind you so you can move closer to the person. And they're doing the same with their hula hoop.
Mm,
But the hula hoop does not drop. So that leaves still some space there, right?
right.
And so if you think about that in boundaries of do we even have a hula hoop right now? Or did we drop it and go get in someone else's? Because then we're walking all over their boundaries now, right?
Hmm.
There's enough autonomy when we stay within our own boundaries for both people to still have and connection at the same time. Boundaries
Yeah.
just tell you how to be in relationship. You're teaching other people how can you be in relationship with me? For some
Hmm.
people, we may move closer and let some, not have as much of a boundary. Some people, we need that hula hoop there so that you can only come up to here. I can engage with you, but it has to be right here, right?
Right.
So I think clients enjoy that visual, because then I could say if we're talking through something, I'm like, where was your hula hoop?
Hmm.
What hoop were you in? Or they'll say, I was telling me about a situation, and they're like, I was totally in the other person's hula hoop.
Yeah.
Like I lost sight of mine. So
Yeah.
that's I think a helpful visual for that.
Honestly, I have friends, and I wish old me could have heard that. Like the hula hoop analogy. It's a very
Mm-hmm.
great way to put it. I have friends who, uh, they're not in their own hula hoop. Even me, forever. I was
Mm-hmm.
like, when I was getting help, finally, I was like, where did my hula hoop go? I like left it back like 10 years ago, wherever I was. I was like,
Mm-hmm.
oh, it's way back there. Let me go grab it.
Yep.
Because I was just not me.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's
Interesting.
beautiful.
Thank you.
So where Where can my viewers find you, Melanie?
So my website is traumatherapynashville.com, and I'm on Instagram, Facebook, just Trauma Therapy Nashville. So
I love it.
yeah, it's pretty easy.
Yeah, very.
Yeah.
I'll put all those links down below. Thank you again, Melanie, for coming on. This has been a real pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you. I've had a lot of fun. I appreciate it.
And to all my viewers, I will see you guys next time.